بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. اللهم صل على سيدنا Muhammad وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. In the name of God, the most gracious, most merciful. We ask Allah, God, to send peace and blessings upon our beloved Prophet Muhammad and family and companions. Welcome everyone to A Path of Healing with Ubaidullah Evans. Alhamdulillah, this is our third session of 5. We'll be starting Ubaid, mashallah. Good to be here with you again. Last week we spoke about isolation under the whole umbrella of A Path to Healing, and then this week kind of the theme. And we could go off topic a little bit, right? But the theme is pretty much spirituality.
I'm here with Ali Dia. We're definitely going off topic a little bit.
A little bit. But today is about that word spirituality, and on the way here, actually, I was thinking, I'm like, man, what does that mean to me, or what does that mean in general? And what's your take on that word before I bring like the Webster dictionary definition out?
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونستهديه. MashaAllah, it's a great honor, great privilege, as always, to be with all of our attendees virtually. We're together in spirit, inshallah. And also an extreme privilege to be with you, to be with Amir.
No, it's good to be here with you.
To be in conversation about things that are meaningful, inshallah. And, you began with a very important question. And I don't think that there's a precise answer, for that question. Spirituality, ironically, is a word that does not have a classical Arabic equivalent.
Really?
There is no, you won't find any narration of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or even, prominent members of the early Muslim community, certainly not in the Quran, that mentions ruhaniya or ruhiyya. These are modern standard Arabic terms. A lot of modern standard Arabic are kind of Arabic words that are derived from English and French and other languages. So, ruhiyya or ruhaniya, spirituality, is not a word that was in use among early Muslims. I think because they didn't have this strict demarcation of life into like the sacred and the mundane, or the spiritual and the material. That's something that is very particular to Western European history. This idea of like the material and the spiritual. Whereas, for the Prophet ﷺ in the early Muslim community, you get the sense that the everyday, the mundane, the material was infused with the spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Even, like those hadith, and I take these hadith very, very seriously, as we should, because they're authentic, where the Prophet ﷺ picks up some stones and he calls some of the companions over, and they said that they could hear the stones making the tasbihat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, what was miraculous about that was not that the stones were making tasbih. What was miraculous was that they could hear it, right? They were allowed to hear it. So, even looking at the material world, or the Prophet ﷺ used to stand upon a tree stump to give khutbah.
Right.
And then they fashioned a mimbar for him. And when he was giving khutbah for the first time, standing on the mimbar, the tree could be heard weeping.
Okay.
It's mentioned in the Quran that when the disbeliever, the wicked person, it's perhaps a better translation, dies, the heavens and the earth don't shed a tear for their passing. Of course, the mafhum al-mukhalafa, the opposite
understanding,
implication is that when the believer dies, the earth actually misses the good deeds that she used to do upon the earth, right? So my point is that, and Sayyid Hussein Nasr, he writes very beautifully about this, that our worldview was one that even the stuff we call like material, it had it like an inner spiritual life to it. But that's something completely different than how we think about these things.
It's interesting that you say that, because this is the definition that I came up with. Not me, that I saw on in Oxford Language Dictionary. It said spirituality, the quality of being concerned with the human spirit or soul as opposed to material or physical things.
Right. That's a very Western.
It's funny that you brought that up right away.
No, and I mean, but as is the case with every kind of discursive tradition, every kind of tradition of talking about things in a particular way, things are given their meanings by the way people have talked about those things in the past.
Right.
So when you invoke a term like spirituality, you inherit that history, kind of the history of the term spirituality in the English, language. But trying to offer something tangible, something we can work with as people just trying to improve spiritually and get in touch with our spirituality. I think spirituality is paying attention to the deeper meanings of things, all sorts of things, of life, of our relationships, of our relationship with the natural environment, of course, our relationship with Allah, paying attention to the deeper meanings of things, going beyond the surface and seeing meaning. Because meaning, believe it or not, is not something that can be taken for granted. Meaning, one has to be intentional about forming meaning. If I make myself clear.
Yeah, definitely.
You have to be intentional about it. You do have, different schools of philosophy that attempt to kind of encapsulate meaning in different ways. Like the, existentialist school, the meaning is whatever you give it, right? There is no metaphysical reality, but whatever meaning you give life is kind of, what life means to you. The absurdist school, life doesn't have a meaning. We're just atoms crashing into each other, right? We say, no, the meaning of life, تبارك الذي بيده الملك الذي خلق الموت والحياة ليبلوكم أيكم أحسن عملا. Blessed is he in whose hands is the dominion. He who created life and death to test you, to see who is best in their deeds. For us, that's the meaning of life. And everything that we see, supports that meaning, holds up, that meaning. And that is kind of the fount, if you will, of our spirituality.
Right. When you were talking, what came up to me was in باختلاف الليل والنهار لآيات لأولو الألباب, right? In the transition of the night and day, right? So you were saying people who can take nature, right, and get meaning out of it. There are signs in them, right, for the people of the core, right, or the people of insight, maybe, and that's that's the way I've seen a lot of artists that I know. They're able to take something and something as like the cup of water, and then they just instill all this meaning into it, and it takes somebody who is looking at life in a perspective, what I'm getting from what you're saying, at a deeper level than just like,
atoms crashing into each
exactly
other.
or just like the empirical.
Of course, I think it's almost like when you read critics of religion, and I think some of them are well-intentioned, right? But often you see this really uncritical oversight that, if the world was free of religion, the world would be free of bigotry, and human communities wouldn't be divided, and we'd be. And I'm always thinking, no, if the world was free of religion, we would be radically socially Darwinist. Like if there was just material, then the point of the game would be acquiring as much as you can.
Right.
The point of the game would be, engaging in a self-serving, other obliterating way. That's the point of the game. There is really no
survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest. There really is no empirical basis for like the validity of charity. Why? There's no empirical basis for even like the validity of mercy. Why be merciful? Why be charitable? If we're dealing with just the hard stuff of material, why? Right? Why? So when I think spirituality, it's being able to see meaning that transcends, that goes beyond, mere materiality, seeing more.
Yeah, and in that seeing more, you also mentioned in one of the verses in the Quran, which is the book descended by God to the heart of the Prophet, peace be upon him. You also mentioned that Allah said that part of this life is that you're going to be tested. And in seeing that, right, might give you a different perspective of the meaning of life. And you're talking about how meaning is also interplayed with spirituality, right? So we now, these past, what have you, I don't know.
2020, the whole 2020.
The whole 2020, I don't know what else to say about it. It's been a collective test, man. And, what do we extract from that in terms of spirituality, especially without giving folks a sense of spiritual bypassing as well?
Yeah, it's all about meaning. I know we've used that word already probably like 50 times, but it's impossible to talk about spirituality without talking about meaning. So you can have two people that experience the exact same thing, meaning their experiences are identical. But if one person attaches some meaning to what they've been experiencing beyond what is apparent, beyond just the material, right, then that will reinforce their spirituality. They could see it as a test. They could see it as an opportunity to get closer to God. They could see it as an opportunity to become one of the patient who inherit paradise with no reckoning. They could see it as any number of meanings that they could attach to struggle, right? To struggle, to sacrifice. If a person who doesn't see anything beyond the material experiences the same thing, they will only be able to call it suffering. And they probably will see it as completely unjustified, unrequited, and with nothing to kind of, I guess, beat back natural feelings of misery, sadness, depression. Even those of us that espouse spirituality and try our most earnest and our best, we still fall into misery, depression, sadness, and we actually see meaning in life. What then for a person who experiences exactly the same thing but doesn't see any of those things? So I think the protection of spirituality is that it gives one a set of narratives. It makes certain understandings of reality accessible so that reality becomes not only manageable, but something in which you find great significance, great meaning, and ultimately perhaps success.
Yeah.
Inshallah. Not a dunyawi success, right, not a success of this world, but an ultimate success.
Maybe hope as well.
And hope is spiritual. Hope is spiritual. And this is where, the Arabic doesn't completely line up. Because in Arabic for hope, we say amal.
No.
Right? We say amal. And then fa'al, like al-fa'lu min al-iman, people say optimism. But optimism and hope in English are different. Optimism usually is born out of an honest assessment of a given situation. I look at it and I see some things that are promising. I see some things that are forward looking. So I become optimistic, right? But optimism usually has a basis. There's a basis for optimism. Hope is in spite of, it can be in spite of not seeing anything that would give me optimism. I'm still hopeful. Hope is a you send that, is a, complete empiricist can be optimistic, right? Hope is something different than that. And that's why, I would say often, while lecturing, I'm a Black man in America. I don't have any optimism, based on the past and the present. The future doesn't look good, but I have hope because I believe in Allah. And I believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is capable of redeeming my people, redeeming white Americans, redeeming this country.
I mean, you're going into a topic that was extremely in the news, and we've all felt it, right? And I remember you and I got together on a little call as well. I believe in Ramadan or right after Ramadan as well, where we talked about some of these issues. But yeah, so with the topics that you just brought up, right? How do you intertwine a certain sense of spirituality and hope for a community, right, that seems to themselves that they've been unfairly treated or disenfranchised or placed in a situation where, they tell them, well, pull yourself up from your bootstraps. Well, the answer is that we don't even got bootstraps to do that with. Like, how do you instill a certain level of, because what's interesting is that, before you say anything, within the generally speaking, for me, in my experience, within the Black African American community, right, I've seen them to be extremely spiritual all the time, even if they didn't necessarily believe in a God or a divine power or whatnot, but they were always.
I think to some degree, spirituality has been a lifeline and a means of survival, for Black people in America. And spirituality, how we've been defining it, is a very broad, construct. Some people find it in music, others in art, others in family, others in community. But we are talking about meaning that transcends the material, right? For us, the highest expression of spirituality is the path of Sayyidina Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But it is but, a path, although we believe it's the path that leads directly to God, right? Because it's the path of the chosen of God, al-Mustafa alayhi salatu wassalam. But there are many different expressions of spirituality. And you'll find that for people that have experienced chronic and historical oppression, if they really submitted to a completely materialistic worldview, they would have to see themselves as irreparably vanquished. Meaning, what they have the goals. I've been subjugated. I'm incarcerated en masse, generationally poor. My schools are under-resourced. My neighborhoods are over-policed. If you're talking just materially, it doesn't look good for me. And I think sometimes it's hard, especially as a collective. We're not talking about this person that is capable of individual success or that person that's capable of individual success. But if you don't have a spiritual Weltanschauung, which is a German word, right?
Yeah, translation.
A worldview, right? If you don't have a spiritual worldview, it's hard to see yourself as something other than a failure. It's hard to see yourself as something other than a people that have been conquered, a people that have just, a people that have been subjugated, a people that have been dominated. But when you have that lens of spirituality, there is a rich inward life that, in spite of your material lack or what is clearly inadequate materially, spiritually we're very rich with our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rich in family, rich in culture, rich in creativity, rich in expression. rich in love for one another. And I think that, I think the African American community is a community that demonstrates kind of the power of spirituality at the margins. Meaning, when you're not at the center of empire, these are some of the gifts, really. And I don't, I want to be careful because I don't want to sacralize poverty. I'm not sacralizing, being over policed or being incarcerated en masse or being chronically poor, or I'm not sacralizing that. But I think it's a part of the justice of God that just as those things contain horrors materially, there are some gifts that only reveal themselves, spiritual, non-material gifts, in adversity. That's just the way that it is. I remember once I was talking with, Dr. Jackson, and he said, if you took two Quranic personalities, one being Sayyidina Yusuf alayhi salam, and the other being Sayyidina Sulaiman alayhi salam, from a worldly perspective, their realities couldn't be more different. Sulaiman is a king. He has the jinn working for him.
Right.
Man, that's gangster, man. I got the jinn on my payroll. You feel me? You know what I'm saying? I got the jinn on my payroll. They build things for me. You know what I'm saying? Yusuf, on the other hand, betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a well, left for dead, sold into slavery, sexually assaulted, on numerous occasions, jailed in spite of his innocence, serving the prison population with a special talent that he was given by God, makes one request of his fellow inmates: when you're released, or one of them, when you're released, don't forget me. The inmate is released, forgets him, languishes in prison for bid'a sinin, a few more years, 3 to 9 years. We don't know. It's the language allows for 3 and up to 9 years. I mean, this is different than Suleiman's experience. Watching steeds run by with speed and commenting on his love for horses. This is different. And marrying Bilqis, and this is different. Dr. Jackson said to me, why are you laughing?
It's amazing.
No,
it's amazing.
This is a different reality.
Yeah.
Dr. Jackson said to me, Dr. Sherman Jackson, he said, in terms of their experience of the attributes of Allah, both of them have an experience that is prophetic.
Mm.
But do you think that Yusuf knew the same things that Suleiman knew? And do you think that Suleiman knew the same things that Yusuf knew?
Right.
No. Though the Yusuf's experience has its own individual insights, and so does Suleiman's. I mean, to be a righteous king is different than being, a person enslaved and then jailed in spite of your innocence. But what you learn about God in those situations, completely different. So, given the experience of Black people in America, the spiritual fruits that experience has yielded, we probably don't even take stock of them, because I think now, and it's very difficult. This is my point. It's very difficult to do that because I think you don't want to be mistaken for someone, saying that there's some good in poverty or some good in enslavement or there's some good in being made a fifth column or not even a column, in this country. And that's not what we're saying, right? We're not saying anything that would militate against the need to call for justice and to establish justice. No, we're Muslim. We believe in the establishment of justice, but we do recognize that adversity has spiritual fruits, spiritual fruits that success doesn't have,
Man, that was beautiful. I really enjoyed that. I'm going to use that one day. Suleiman and Yusuf, that was a great way to compare to, because, the truth is, all I know is the path Allah has given me as well. And I think I can try to force myself to be in other people's shoes. And I feel like I do that relatively well, because being in healthcare, being in this line of work, being the middle child of 5 siblings, usually you're pretty aware of how to conduct yourself with people and see them where they're at. But that's why that hit a chord with me so much. Because like you still won't know, and to get to know the prophets like that is amazing. But to get to know the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam like that would be something unreal for me. And talking about the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, you mentioned the stones that would remember God in his hands, right? And they were remembering God anyways, but when he picked them up, it's one of the companions can hear them, which is one of the miracles that God allows to show the place of the companions to us as well. But and then you spoke about that tree, right? That wailed, and the Prophet ﷺ comforted it, and he said, if I would not have comforted it, it would have kept wailing until the day of judgment. And the only way he comforted it is saying, wouldn't you want to be with me in the garden? And then the tree stopped. It's like, yeah, I want to be with you in the garden. So that tree had like true spiritual insight. It's like, actually, yeah, this is a limited time. I'd rather be with you in the garden. And that hits me hard because sometimes when you're talking about bringing the horizontal with the vertical at all times, because that's what Islam is, right? It's like you're drinking water, but you say God's name right before you drink water, and it's not the water that's giving you quenching your thirst, right? Or 7-Up, right? But it's who is God, right? And we know these things with companions that used to drink like seven cartons of milk and not feel satiated, and then after they enter into Islam, they drink 2 and they feel offended. Right? 1, forgive me, but we know these things, and that's a spiritual dimension. All of these things are a spiritual dimension. For Muslims, or maybe even myself, when I think of spirituality, my mind goes to those things right away.
Well, I think we live in a time where spirituality is extremely difficult. Spirituality is very challenging. The famed German sociologist Max Weber, when defining kind of post-Christendom, or defining kind of looking at like the defining feature of the European Enlightenment, he said it's disenchantment, something. So but it's disenchantment, though. This idea that in order for the scientific revolution, and then after that the commercial explosion, you have to cease to see the world as made up of like sacred stuff. Because when the world is made up of sacred stuff, like stones that remember God, and animals that Suleiman can hear ants, and you don't just exploit that. You don't just destroy that. That understanding of the world is one that lends itself to sustainability. Kind of like,
like balance.
There's balance because Allah has placed the earth for all creatures, right? For all creatures. And the earth itself is made up of stuff that must be respected, because there's a life that it has. The Prophet, peace be upon him, used to name his things. Right. His camel was named Qaswa.
No.
Right. His firash, his spread was named Jamia. Right. The gather.
Bring it together.
Because it gathers people.
Yeah, it gathers people.
It brings people together.
That's amazing.
There's a relationship that you have with things when you see them as possessed of a significance, if that makes any sense. And it's very easy to see how spirituality I mean, that in and of itself is spiritual. I mean, you're seeing a meaning in these things. There's a saying that uh, um, a simpleton, I want to get this right, looks at a group of trees and he sees trees. A poet looks at them and he sees a forest. A mystic looks at them and she sees a manifestation. A capitalist looks at them and he sees lumber. Do you understand what I'm saying? 100%. So, you can see how from the poet to the mystic to the capitalist, I don't see this as being possessed of any meaning. This is just something to be used. So it's kind of like an overemphasis of taskhir. This is just something to be used. This is just something, to be profited from, to be sold, to be marketed, right? We live in a world in which that is the default. This is just stuff. This doesn't mean anything. We're not appreciative for any of it. We don't see it as, containing a spiritual significance. It's just stuff.
Or as a tape recorder.
Yeah, what I'm saying?
Because the walls and your hands, and they attest for you or against you on the digital. They're listening.
It's almost like we just see this stuff as it's just stuff. So we live in a very materialistic world. I mean, the Muslims, the Jews, all of us. Our worldview is a worldview of disenchantment, is what Weber would call it. It's like stuff doesn't mean anything. It's just some stuff, man. Right? It's very hard to be a traditionally spiritual person when that's how you see the world around you. Stuff doesn't mean anything. And that's why a lot of moderns, they talk about experiencing the greatest spirituality in nature. Because as opposed to the concrete jungle and being in the city where, now for me, maybe I'm different. Even in cities, I feel a great spiritual presence.
I feel you 100% on that.
Because but it's because of the creativity of people, which I think is also divine in its origin. I look at different forms of, commercial architecture, residential architecture, and, certain kinds of cityscapes, and just the movement of people. And, I do find that, very spiritual. So if I'm in Chicago, or because I don't want my wife might hear me talking like this. I'm like, okay, so I know I'm moving to North Carolina soon. No, I'm afraid I'm a man of the city, man. If it's not Chicago, it's New York. And it's not New York, it's London. You know what I'm saying? It's not London, it's Paris. I'm a man of the city. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of moderns, they find great spiritual solace and resonance in nature, because there they can clearly see this is significant. This has meaning. This isn't just lumber. This is a manifestation. This is a reflection of the creative power of God. Now, the city also is a reflection of the creative power of God. But, the Arabs, they say, إِذَا ظَهَرَ السَّبَبْ ذَهَبَ الْعَجَبْ. If you can see a clear basis for something, you're not amazed by it. So the cities, you see people building this out, and okay, it's not. But when you're in the, unadulterated nature, right, you feel, a little bit more of a spiritual connection. And I think that one of the things that, we have to work on, if we really want to grow in our spirituality, whatever that means, to us, right, is we have to work on making our surroundings more spiritual, in a certain sense, just like that they have meaning. They have meaning, like our homes, like thinking of your home, not, I don't want to go straight, crazy on you, right? But like, this is this place provides me and my family with shelter, and the peace that exists within it, I want to preserve.
Right.
And I want to, decorate it in a way that reminds me of that this place is special. This is a special place. This is, a place that we eat together and pray together and recite the Quran together. And, that's what spirituality is really built on. Being able to see. Now, if you want to just say it's an A-frame house, then, I mean, that's what it's going to be, right? But if you say it's our home, you've already gone from something strictly material to something spiritual. See, it can be very simple. Like the difference between a house and a home. See, when we say house, we're just talking about the structure. The structure, it could be a house, A-frame house, could be a bungalow, could be a gray stone. It's a house. But when you say home, you mean something much deeper than just the limestone or the siding or the bricks. You're talking about this is the mise en scene. This is the place where our lives together take place. And that's significant.
Right. It could also not even be a house where your home is.
Yeah, absolutely. It could be somewhere else.
It could be somewhere else.
Home is where the heart is. Man.
Yes, sir. Yes,
sir. But the reason I'm mentioning that, I love architecture and I love homes, but I'm mentioning that to say that that's the difference between a purely materialistic outlook and a spiritual outlook. And that's why if you say something like that, most people, my contention is that most people are spiritual in their own way. I personally think it is very difficult for a human being to really, really be like a positivist kind of materialist. I don't believe that. Because if you did, you'd have to look at everything just on an empirical basis. There's no love as like a manifestation that God creates or that exists between two people. It's just a chemical reaction. It's just increased levels of serotonin and dopamine. It doesn't. Right. There's no love. What is that? That's not. There is no home. This is a house. This is where we live right now. There's no home. No, that's not. I think part of being a conscious human being is that you either seek that kind of meaning or you develop that kind of meaning. Mm-hmm. That you say, like, Chicago, my home. Look, there's Maxwell Street Polishes, and there's Hyde Park. And you're saying there's something beyond just the geographical location that is Bridgeview, wherever you're from. There's something beyond the there's something beyond. I'm from University Park, actually. I'm not even from Chicago.
No, but look, we got a few more minutes before we go to Q&A. And Amir's looking at me like we got to jump on that. But I got two things I want to ask you. Okay, you talked about home, and now you're talking about the meaning of things. So what are some meanings that you've derived out of 2020? And then the second one, should I just ask both right now? Sure. And the second one is, I've seen so many people, especially like patients of mine or folks on the street that I talk to, they're like, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And I always try to understand what that means.
I get that. Actually, I want to speak to
that one first.
Those, inshallah. The meanings. 2020. I think. For me, it slowed me down a lot. I was traveling a lot. Working outside of Chicago often, and I didn't really understand because I've been working at a similar clip. Ever since I got married, the second time, I just worked a lot. You know what I'm saying? I had a family and, had to provide for them, with the help and assistance of my wife. And I just worked a lot. And I think that I didn't really understand what I was missing, you know, in terms of those Fridays, Saturdays, Sundays, what I can cultivate with my children, you know, during those times. I think that sometimes when you talk about like meaning, children, I think, are deeply spiritual
Right.
beings. Mm-hmm. And something that for me is just a simple, mundane walk to the store, to my son is an odyssey.
Right.
You know, I'm with my dad, and you know, every part of it is significant to him. And sometimes he'll relate to me. You know, we went to the park, Dad, and then this happened, and duck and walk. And I'm like, well, it was all significant to him. Me, I was probably just thinking, son, please be quiet, man. I don't know, son. You know, and just what I'm able to cultivate with them, spending more unstructured time with them. I think 2020, you know, revealed that to me. Another thing that I learned, you know, in 2020 is just how fragile, you know, the American body politic is, man. You know, I mean, you know, what happened in the case of, you know, George Floyd being murdered wasn't something that, you know, has never happened before. And even the reaction wasn't something that has never happened before. You know, the Watts riots, you know, kind of nationwide rioting after the death of, you know, Martin Luther King Jr., the Rodney King riots in you know, in LA. I think that this time I felt like, and I want to choose my words carefully and choose them wisely. You know, I felt like there was much more being negotiated, you know, in that civil unrest than in years past. I think in years past, you still had kind of a very naive belief that, you know, America is good, but people are upset because, you know, there are some problems. Whereas this time I felt a more thoroughgoing critique of the whole thing. Like, you know, is this project, this democratic project, is it even salvageable? Is it even, you know, like I felt like the civil unrest that came out of, you know, George Floyd's murder was much more encompassing in terms of the probing questions that were being asked about, you know, America and its way of life. In witnessing that, I really had hoped that Muslims, through institutional development, would be able to offer more than we've offered. You know, sometimes I think, you know, you hear Muslims saying things like be on the right side of history, and we shape history. What do you mean be on the right side of history? Like history is out there happening and we just want to make sure that we're aligned with the right parties. No, we should be out or perhaps not out anywhere. We should be living an alternative that makes available to people different ways of seeing the world and different ways of seeing themselves.
Yeah.
And that's really the significance of the work that I think we're trying to do at Ta'leef, and making that accessible to all people.
Right. It's like when the Muslims finally go to the subcontinent and they challenge the class system. How? By just putting that sufra down on the floor, or putting that that food right on the floor, and just telling folks to eat with them, and the folks would tell them, no, I'm not at your class or this guy, and they would just say, no, just eat. Eat. So it's like offering an alternative.
That's what it's all. That's what it's really about. It's about, you know, offering a chance at, you know, true humanity, you know, to all people. You know, it's not. Yeah, we start with the vulnerable. We start with the beleaguered. You know, we start with the hunted. But we have to have something to say to those that have oppressed them as well.
Yeah.
And it can't be just guilt trips and having them engage in all of these apologist calisthenics. And I don't have any interest in that personally. 2020 was a year where I was forced to kind of think about that. And then COVID-19, man. I think COVID-19 has brought us all closer to our humanity. I think to be a human being is to be contingent in your reality at all times. There's no way that I can ensure my own survival. Recognizing that, there are so many things that are outside of my control that have to go exactly right for me to stay alive, for me just to exist. And if you are spiritually aware, that leads you to submission to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hubris and superciliousness and false self-sufficiency can make no promises, when you're dealing with something like a global pandemic. And it's amazing, to see people. I mean, it's amazing. I'm not, I can feel my wife's scorn when I say this, but I think, because she's like, wait, I don't think that's the same thing. I actually think this comparison is relevant, but she doesn't. But she's a lot smarter than me. But I'm the one that get paid to talk about this stuff. So. You know what I'm saying? But I remember people that if we talked about fiqh, they would either be lukewarm towards fiqh, or some of them would just straight up say, that's just obscurantism, all of these details about wiping the fingers and the water. And I mean, look, we're worshiping God. Let's focus on the big picture and all of these details. This stuff is unnecessary. And it's amazing to see those same people adhering to all of the COVID protocols very carefully. It's amazing to see those same people. Wait, there's 3 people in this elevator. There should just be 2. It's just like, so there is a part of you that is mutashaddid. Yeah,
it just depends on
what is that?
It means life or death.
It comes with that doing protocol. You can ensure your safety in dunya. You're very careful about them. But people who thought or who think in being careful about things that are, protocols and guidelines that we can ensure our akhirah, you call us silly. Mm-hmm. You call us narrow-minded and provincial, which is just funny to me. Which is just one of those interesting human parallels. It's like, types of water the Hanafis talk about. Who cares about that? Oh, wait. 6 feet. 6. No, that's kind of like 5.5. We must have 6 feet. It's just like subhanallah. I guess there is a part of you that's quite detail oriented, but I think all of that, points to, just a recognition of our contingency, and, we are concerned. Some of us are worried. Some of us are scared, but that all of those are actually natural for human beings. It's only this reality that has given us a false sense of security, because when you feel those things, you're supposed to do what? Tawakkaltu ala Allah. Inni tawakkaltu ala Allah. Well, akhd bil asbab. Use the means at your disposal. And inni tawakkaltu ala Allah. I rely on God. And I think COVID-19 has placed us there. And then to your last point, people that say, I'm spiritual, but I'm not religious.
Yes.
What I hear when I hear that is a deep distrust of human agency, right? They're looking for something pure, meaning like in terms of being able to see meaning and significance, I see that, but I don't want anything that is mediated by a person. I don't want anything that's mediated by human beings. Right, and this is why one of the arkan of iman is belief in the prophets. And we believe that they're what? Ma'asumun min al-khat. that they're divinely protected from error. And this is why the Shahada is La ilaha illallah, Muhammadur Rasulullah. Right? You actually have quite a few moderns that La ilaha illallah, that doesn't trouble them. If you say, there's only one God, and
except
only
God
is
worthy to worship.
okay, But when you say Muhammad or Rasulullah, now you're talking about behavior, actions. You're talking about guidelines, expectations, rules, regulations, and you have to accept that these will be dictated and mediated by someone who's just like a human being. The Prophet ﷺ is a human being. So part of, I think, what people in that place are struggling with is that I have faith in God, but I don't have faith in humanity anymore. And what I say is, you've gone to one too many humanities courses at your university, you see, because you actually don't believe in human nobility anymore. And I'll say this, I know we're way over time, and Amir is very uncomfortable.
He got the mic up to his lips, ready to ask the next question.
No, but in terms of that distrust of humanity, I mean, I can trust in God. There's something beyond the materiality of dunya, but other than that, it would require some human agency to fill in any gap or give that details. I don't trust that, right? I heard something, man, and this isn't. I mean, the person that said it was an open adherent to a Sufi tariqah, but I don't think that reduces the accessibility of the point that he was making at all. Meaning that even if you don't subscribe to that, I think this point is still something you'd be able to appreciate. He said, yeah, a lot of people do distrust human beings. A lot of people have lost their faith in humanity. But he said, if they've never even met a friend of God before, it's probably a stretch for them to think about something like a prophet.
Yeah, I feel that.
If you've never even met a person that's not a prophet, not like that, but just a friend of God, a person that has been befriended by God, and you never got a chance to see them in their actions and their intentions and their behavior, something like a prophet is so far flung to you. It's like, man. Right. And this is where, you see all of this attempt to discredit religious people. This is a shaitanic thing. Because when you discredit religious people, you're actually weakening people's ability to believe in the second half of their shahada. When you're trying to make it look, all of these religious scholars, they're really perverts, they're really nasty, they're really morally corrupt. All of them are eating out of the hand of corrupt governments, and this is none of them have any integrity. And this is, if a person believes that, then I mean, it's very difficult for them to really think that human beings can serve as vessels for the revelation of God, but they can. Certain human beings can. You see.
All right, Amir, we're ready for the next question. See? Yes, we're sure.
Bismillah. So the first question we have is, just like spiritual bypassing, can you use just like spiritual bypassing can be used to suppress very human frailties and vulnerabilities, can new concepts like spirituality bypass and others be used to bypass spirituality? If so, how would one distinguish and be aware of that?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. I'm open tonight, man. You know what I'm saying? So I'm
That's what we want. This is the whole point of this.
Yeah, I'm feeling good.
Yes,
man.
sir.
I'm feeling good. Spiritual bypassing was a term that I encountered through the work of Tetlif. I was introduced to the term by Osama Khan. I hadn't heard the term before that. I don't remember where he encountered the term, but I know he didn't invent the term, but he encountered the term in some reading. And the term was taken to mean this process by which one avoids very real human emotions, feelings, etc., through these kind of 2D, these two-dimensional, flat, trite, cheap kind of spiritual slogans. And so the quintessential example is like a person is grieving the loss of a loved one, and the person says, "El-Baqalillah," only God remains forever. It's like, what is that? I mean, I'm still grieving the loss of my loved one, or a person is going through a divorce, and it's very difficult, and you say, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will enrich both parties. Fear not. As if that removed the very real difficulty or challenge or pain or whatever it is a person might be experiencing. And from that vantage point, I appreciate the term spiritual bypassing. However, I think about this stuff. However, what I find is that it really depends. Something being a spiritual bypass or not, it really depends on the relationship of the person you're speaking to with what you're saying. Because the same things that, some might regard as a spiritual bypass, other people might regard as real inspiration, motivation. And it's not a bypass. It's not a bypass. My cousin, really my play cousin, we got, I don't know if Autumn, you guys have play cousins?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
We have play cousins. And, just his mother, my mother were friends before we were born.
Yeah,
we kind of grew
100%.
up together, play cousin, right? But we were very close as if we were cousins. I loved him and I know he loved me. He was in Roseland one night, my play cousin, and he got killed, we don't even know for what, but when they found him, his body was riddled with bullets, from his abdomen all the way up to his head. And, he had just, returned home from prison. He was coaching boys basketball. He was an excellent basketball player. He might be the best basketball player I've ever seen besides Ali Dia.
Yeah.
Best basketball player I've ever played with besides Ali Dia. He was a point guard too. Saw the floor. Could shoot, dribble. Everything. Just troubled off the court. Because he really could have been in the league. He was that good. He was like kind of a mini CP3 before CP3.
Right.
He was that good. But when I attended his funeral, when it came time for his mother to eulogize him, to speak, she simply said that she made no claim to understand why this had happened to her son. She didn't know why. She said, but she knows that everything that happens is decreed by God. And then she said, and if I understood everything that God did, then God would not be worthy of my worship. If I could encompass God in his action, then God would not be worthy of my worship.
He wouldn't be God anymore.
He wouldn't be God.
Yeah.
The fact that he is omnipotent, he is all powerful. And one of the things about being all powerful is you can use your power in any way that you want to. And sometimes he uses his power in ways that challenge us. Man, that helped that woman to stand up. That wasn't a spiritual bypass. That wasn't like give us some little principles of Aqidah. And her son, I'm her son was sitting in front of her in a casket. This is a Christian woman. She mentioned this not by way of spiritual bypassing, nor did she say, because of this, my grief is relieved. Now, I don't know why this happened, and I'm clearly grieving. I'm in tears. I'm broken up. I'm hurt. But why I can stand here today is because this is my understanding of spirituality. This is my understanding of God. This is my understanding of meaning. And for us to reduce statements of that kind of import to just spiritual bypassing. No, it's not. Wait a minute now. I think if a person is insensitive in offering that, meaning they offer this kind of just as like, slogans that they just say to people that they don't even know. And yeah, I think that could be a blameworthy kind of spiritual bypassing. On the other hand, if you're attempting to speak from heart to heart and you tell somebody, look, I know you're sad. I know you're upset. I know you're grieving. I know you're hurt. But qaddarallahu wa ma sha'a fa'ala. I'm telling you this. I'm not attempting to, spiritual bypass. I'm acknowledging all of those things. And I'm not telling you not to feel those things. But I'm attempting to speak some truth to your pain. This is the reality.
Right. And I think two things as well with it's funny, anybody that talks to me, I guess not privately anymore, knows how much I dislike that term. It's hysterical. That term has been used and abused and changed and I don't even talk about it that much, to be honest with you. But two things that I've seen in my short period of service with Tadif: something lands as spiritual bypassing if the individual who's talking to you about your situation has absolutely no connection to you.
Right.
Automatically. You can't go up to someone and say, God's got your back, and you don't even know him from Adam. They'd be like, bro, don't talk to me. Don't say this nonsense to me. But if you came up to me at a time of hardship, and you're like, Ali, I've known you for 15 years, bro. Allah has your back. Oh, that's going to hit me different.
It's going to hit you. And that's why I think sometimes we have to be careful about how we deploy those terms. It's not, that's, man, speaking to my own situation, I was given a similar talk when my first wife passed away. And
God have mercy on her soul.
I mean, she was a good woman, a good Muslim, and a student of the Quran. Allah yarhamuha.
I remember I'm one of
that knew me when she and I were together.
I remember that.
She was a great woman. I'm one of those people that are lucky to have been married to two amazing women. Allah Akbar. But when she passed, somebody said that to me about, Allah's over all things powerful. He's not questioned concerning what he decrees, but you are questioned concerning how you react to what he decrees. And it wasn't, the person who said it to me was very close to me. And it wasn't spiritual bypassing, man. It wasn't like harsh or insensitive or it didn't fail to recognize my vulnerability or my grief or my pain, but it was like a slap.
Yeah.
It was like a slap. Hey, look, we're Muslim. Why do you think we're doing all the praying and the fasting and the reading the Quran and trying to for times like this? You've invested in your faith. Now believe. Believe. You have just seen the power of God. Believe now. You had a whole plan what you were going to do, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, no, this is my plan. And my best friend was talking to me about when Michael Jackson, passed away. If you want to say Allah yarhamu, maybe you can.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He was telling me, he said that, when Mike was preparing for this tour, Mike said, this is going to be my biggest return ever. And he said, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said it is. You know, I mean, it's not funny.
It's ironic.
It's ironic. It is. This is going to be your biggest return ever. It is. This idea that, look, this is the power of God you're witnessing, right? That's not spiritual bypassing. Sometimes that's like a welcome reminder. On the other hand, to the point of the questioner, you know, doing that in this very cavalier, breezy, you're going through a divorce, patience, inshallah. Sabr. In Allah ma sabr. Allah is with those that are patient. Yeah, I think spiritual bypassing, you can use the term, it's insincere is what it sounds very insincere in somebody that wants a bloodless consolation, meaning you don't want to cry with me, you don't want to empathize with me, you don't really, because the people that I'm telling you about, they were right down there with me. You know, we eye to eye. My eyes are tear filled, theirs are too. Do you understand what I'm saying? And they're telling me, Wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. God is over all things powerful. Not, somebody, send me a text message, Wallahu ala kulli shay'in qadir. Allah's over all things powerful. Qadar Allah ma sha fa'ala. Whatever Allah wanted, He decreed, and that's what happened. I'm saying this to you with power. Man, words, I think we tend to forget that words are really given their significance by who mentions them.
I bet you took it right on my. I said there's two things. The first one is that the individual, if they know you or not. The second one is the state of the individual it's coming out from.
We were sitting there listening to Omar give a khutbah. And every time he said the word God,
you're like you're just like, okay.
He said it like somebody who knew God. God.
No, it's real. And we have that in our, we have that in our history as well. There's some people, they could get up in front of a member, they could get up to give khutbah, and they can mention all the right things and say all the right stuff and mention God, and you fell asleep and nothing happened.
Yes, I remember, listening to Imam Muhammad, Allah yarhamu, worldview Muhammad.
Yeah.
And he would be there speaking, and people that were a part of that community, many of them had gone through a whole transition from the Nation of Islam to, now being a part of kind of a mainstream Muslim community with Imam Muhammad, and many of them were direct followers of his father, and now they're following him. I mean, those gatherings were inspirited with a meaning and a significance that if you weren't a part of that community, you just wouldn't get it. He would be speaking and you'd be saying, I get you. He said, what's that? Sounds like pretty simple Islamic, tarbiyah, so straightforward. People being in tears. Because it's not simply what he's saying, it's him and the tradition. He's the inheritor of a mantle. He's the inheritor of a tradition that they know. So it's not just like, they're not just judging his speech on the basis of, does his subject match his verb or something like that. You know what I'm saying? It's like, there's a different level of resonance. I'll never forget that I was sitting there, just a new person to Islam, like, man. And I just couldn't understand people next to me. That's right. It's like just very, very emotional. Is there something here I'm missing? Or I'm trying to figure it's clear, mashallah, and good, but no, something, they had a different relationship to the speaker than I.
You got more questions? No, let's go one or two questions. Let's do one or two questions.
How do you use spirituality to cope with / support mental illnesses?
I would be أنا لست من فرسان هذا الميدان يعني. I'm not from the people of that field of expertise in terms of the relationship between the two. But mashallah, within our community, you have a lot of emerging voices that speak to the relationship of spirituality and mental health. The Khalil Center is a good resource. Our brother Human, who I haven't had the pleasure of sitting down to dialogue with, but I've seen a lot of his work, heard about a lot of their programming through people like Kamran Chaudhry when he was there. I believe he's somewhere else now. Brother Abdul Malik Merchant in Boston, a good friend of mine, is very interested in that relationship. Dr. Rania, so you have people that are definitely more qualified than I to speak about the relationship between spirituality and mental health. I think to the point of the questioner, just so as to offer something that I hope.
Micah Anderson.
Micah.
That's your boy. Check him. I was talking to him 2 days ago. He says sends us an to you.
Micah. You know what I mean?
Micah.
Shout out to Micah, man. You know what I mean? But so as to offer the questioner something, I want to commend them just because I think they're accurate in understanding that there is a relationship between the two. There is a relationship between the two, and not this kind of disjointed human being that sometimes is treated in the West that it's just mental, and we don't even talk about spirituality. But the mental, the spiritual, the physical, the emotional, this idea of kind of a holistic understanding of our condition. I would love to see Muslims pioneer, that kind of discourse, inshallah.
Let's do one more question, inshallah. Are there any questions? That's it? Alhamdulillah. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for, alhamdulillah, being with us third time now out of 5. Next week, same place, inshallah, Ubaidullah Evans will be discussing, I believe, community, right? Isolation, spirituality, and community. So the next one would be community. And just a reminder to all of you that are here with us virtually, inshallah, this is a path to healing, and that's a part of our campaign. If you can, it would be extremely helpful for Ta'leef to maintain these type of pulses, maintain this type of work, and even more that's happening behind the scenes, inshallah. If you were to donate today and donate now, inshallah, to support Ta'leef and support our work, and inshallah, Allah will reward you, and that's not spiritual bypassing, that's real. And we ask that our beloved teacher, Ubaidullah Evans, closes out with a dua, inshallah.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Wal asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر سبحان ربي رب العزة عما يصفون وسلام على المرسلين والحمد لله رب العالمين.